I was nervous about reviewing this product. I'm feeding my baby foods that could be life-threatening to me, but that is why I'm doing this. Welcome back to another Health Hackers review. A lot has changed since my last episode. I moved house. Here's my new backdrop. I became a mummy. Here's my new baby. Which brings me neatly onto the product I'm reviewing for you in this video. The Lil Mixins Early Allergen Introduction Daily Mix for Babies. A box of little packets of some of the most common food allergens in an infant-safe powder form that are meant to train a baby's immune system to tolerate the foods and therefore potentially prevent a baby from developing an allergy to those foods. That's the idea. As the Lil Mixins website puts it, train tolerance and stop allergies before they start. Here's what's going to happen in this video. I'll tell you why I've been using this kit. I'll show you parts of my interview with the Lil Mixins founder, Meenal Lele, an allergy mum, author and medical researcher. Then I'll round up what I like and what I don't like about the Lil Mixins Early Allergen Introduction Daily Mix. But first, 3 important points to make. Number 1, if you're new to the Health Hackers channel, hello, I'm Gemma. I'm a journalist. I interview pioneering figures in health and I review wellness innovations. If you enjoy this video, I'd love it if you hit the like button or even subscribe and leave me a comment below. Number 2, anything on Health Hackers should not be considered personal or medical advice. Talk to your healthcare providers about you and your babies. I'm not a medical expert. I'm a journalist telling you about my personal experience with this product. And number 3, I bought my Lil Mixins pack from the company's website. I paid for it. It was not a freebie gift, but you, as a Health Hackers viewer, will be able to get a discount on some Lil Mixins purchases. See the summary text for details. Now, I bet you already know rates of food allergies are rising. Here in the US, according to the CDC, 1 in 13 children, or about 2 students per classroom, are thought to be affected by food allergies. And about 40% of children with food allergies are allergic to more than one food. I have an allergy to certain nuts. I carry epinephrine auto-injector pens, antihistamines, and an inhaler in my handbag. I often feel anxious when traveling, eating out, even eating in sometimes. I want to help my baby avoid having to grow up with a food allergy like mine. And before I was pregnant, I was looking into the potential for reducing the risk of developing food allergies. Check out Health Hackers episode 56 with Dr. Tina Sinter from the Sean Parker Center for Allergy and Asthma Research at Stanford University here in Silicon Valley to learn about the role of diet, dirt and dogs, plus the link between laundry detergent and the rise of allergies. Then when I was pregnant, I took steps related to microbiome health, nutrition and certain supplements based on research to try and minimize my baby's risk. My allergist mentioned early allergen introduction with pre-made infant-safe food pouches like Lil Mixins that my baby could try when she was eating solids. There are studies that suggest the early feeding of peanut and egg from at least 4 months of age could help prevent a baby from developing allergies to those foods. Whether or not introducing all allergenic foods early on can have a protective, preventative effect seems to be less clear-cut. But the current dietary guidelines for Americans says potentially allergenic foods, e.g. peanuts, egg, cow milk products, tree nuts, wheat, crustaceans, shellfish, fish and soy should be introduced when other complementary foods are introduced to an infant's diet. So, I can understand why companies such as Lil Mixins, there are others like Spoonful One and Ready Set Food, have created baby food products to sell to parents who want to try and help prevent their kids from getting food allergies. I am one of those parents. The Lil Mixins Daily Mix box holds 28 mini packets, 4 weeks worth of 7 different allergens to rotate on different days. They are infant-safe powder forms of peanut, egg, cashew, walnut, almond, sesame and soy. The advice is to use a packet a day and keep going until a baby is 1. Why 1? Here's what the company's founder told me.
Most food allergies, the reason we say 1, most food allergies tend to develop between the ages of 6 months and 10 months old. So when doctors say start, after 4 months old, you're giving a little bias on the early side and a little bias on the later side. in truth, you really actually want to keep eating the food well after one. But hopefully by that point, the child can eat food, right? We don't really want them eating like, artificial, not artificial, but why change the form factor? Because if by age one, the child should be able to eat more nut butters and eat whole eggs and things like that. I know, of course, some of the nuts you still don't want to do, obviously, whole peanuts and whole walnuts and things like that. But, they can eat a lot of the other form factors. And so kind of using special products is less necessary.
To be clear, breast milk is the main source of nutrition for my baby, but after incorporating some solid foods into her diet, we began the Lil Mixins Daily Mix allergen introduction process, mixing the packets with her pureed fruits, veg or yogurt, and feeding her each allergen on a different day of the week. Our paediatrician was aware, and we actually took my baby girl to eat her very first packet with my allergist close by. It was because my husband and I were nervous she might have inherited my nut allergy. But my daughter was fine. Here is Beatrix being fed by a nurse, eating walnut powder mixed with my homemade blueberry puree and a bit of breast milk. For my safety, instead of breastfeeding her after she eats the packets I'm allergic to, we've been giving her a bottle of my pumped milk to help wash away the nut traces in her mouth before making contact with my skin. It's my husband who does those feeds. We both wear gloves and there's a thorough clean-up operation afterwards. I know that you describe the early allergen introduction process as training wheels for your baby's stomach. So tell us a bit about what you mean by that and how can you be sure that it does work to prevent a baby from developing food allergies?
Honestly, the only way you ever know prevention works, it's kind of a counterfactual. Like you can't really prove the negative, you can't prove that it worked. But what you can see is that you can continue eating the food and you're not reacting to it, right? So a thing that everyone needs to understand, I think, that, or maybe this is helpful for me to think about, is anytime we eat anything, our bodies have a bias towards worrying that this food could be dangerous, right? Because your body has to assume anytime anything goes into your stomach that it could have bad bacteria, it could have something wrong, right? So it's always in alert mode. And so what you're doing by feeding the body these foods in a safe form at this age where the baby's just starting to eat the food is you're actually providing evidence, kind of to the body that this is a safe food. And it starts to build up certain kinds of immune cells, which we call tolerizing cells. So for all of us, we have sort of a reactive part of our immune system, right? That tells our body to go into attack mode. And then we also have a tolerizing part of our immune system that tells our body to like keep it cool. And whenever we have a cold, your body has to do that balance, any kind of virus, anything, right? Because what your body has to do is say, okay, I want to fight off the bacteria, but I don't want to raise my own body temperature so much that I'm going to hurt me, right? So what happens is that you always have this balance. And so by, the training wheels are really to kind of give evidence and data in some sense to this tolerizing immune system. And then it learns to not call the nuts or the eggs a threat.
And that's what I want for my daughter, for her body not to view these allergenic foods as threats. I asked Meenal about the evidence, the studies, what makes her so sure that feeding these allergens early on could help prevent a baby from developing food allergies later.
Well, whenever we want to ask a question like this, right, will X work to do Y? The best way to do a study like that is you take two groups of people that are very similar to each other. And in one group of people, you do what's called the intervention. And the other group of people, you do a control, you do nothing. And so that's what they did when they wanted to ask the question, will feeding peanuts early prevent peanut allergy? They took 800 babies, or they took several hundred babies and they fed them peanuts early, and they took matched control, so very similar babies, but the other half of the babies just continued avoidance. And what they found over time was an 80% reduction in the rate of peanut allergy in the babies who were being fed peanut. And then you see, and this kind of study was repeated over and over. So another thing you look for when you're looking at clinical studies is how was the same finding repeated, right? And so that first study was done in the UK, and then there was another study done, actually a second in the UK, then one in Canada. It's been repeated in Australia. And then the same thing happened with egg. And so again, you use these two groups of babies, you do, feed half eggs and half not. And so what I will point out about that though is, they found an 80% reduction overall. And there's two big points I want you to know about this. Number one is that if babies kept up with the protocol, meaning if they were really good, and I guess it's not the baby's fault, so it's the mom or dad's fault, right? The parents. If the parents were really good about making sure the baby ate enough peanut every single week, there was a 97% reduction in the risk of peanut allergy. And if they did like some amount of exposure, it was more like 60. And so if you average across all those kids, 80%, right? So the first point I want to make is it's the sticking to the repeated exposure every single week is really important. The second thing that's important about that is even with 97%, that's not 100, right? So you're going to have some children who, despite doing this, will still develop the allergy. And their immune system and again, we can talk about all of that, which is kind of where the book goes, is their immune system is in a place where it's just so trigger happy and they end up developing the peanut allergy anyway. But 97% is really, really good, or even 80% risk reduction is really huge. And I know you can speak to this, right? Like you have allergies yourself, and would you take an 80% chance that you could not? I'm sure you would, right?
Oh yeah, and if I wasn't allergic to some tree nuts, this process would feel easier. Foods get stuck under my baby's fingernails, on the high chair, in the sink. If there was a packet that mixed into a bottle of my breast milk instead, that would at least contain some of the risk to me. And I noticed other allergen introduction companies do offer ones you can mix into a bottle. So I asked Meenal, why doesn't Lil Mixins do the same?
The real limiting factor is that it's actually food, right? So the more you process it, right, the more you can potentially put it into a bottle. So I will say that Lil Mixins, you can take the packets and mix them into breast milk or formula in a bottle. What you will get is some amount of settling, because it is a real protein, right? So it won't perfectly suspend or dissolve, I should say, into the milk. And the other reason we really don't want people to mix it into the bottle is because if you think about a bottle of milk, like a 4-ounce bottle of milk, there's not very much protein in that. And what happens when you eat a really heavy protein meal is you eat less. But we don't want children eating less of their formula or breast milk, because that's where 100% of their nutrients are coming from. And you will, over time, start to affect how much milk they're drinking. But that's a bad outcome, actually, right? So we didn't really want that. And we wanted parents, and the AAP says to mix this into food, because they too do not want you to touch how much milk the baby is drinking. So that was the big first reason. But the other limiting factor is, if you look at the total protein content of some of the other products, it's the one that you can continue to mix into milk is under 1 gram of protein. But the only thing that's ever been studied is what happens when a baby eats 2 grams of protein per sitting. So, these are constraints, right? And I think it kind of comes back to early allergen introduction was really meant as a part of complementary feeding. It's really meant to be part of the baby's diet, like their food side of their diet, but not their, you're really just supposed to leave breastfeeding or formula alone. It's kind of sacred in that way, right? We really, really want baby to eat and get their hydration and everything else, right? We just really don't want to affect how that goes. So that's really the reason, is we tell people we're nervous that would, if the baby drinks even 2 or 3 ounces less in a day, but now they're getting less fluids, they're getting less nutrients.
Before my interview with Meenal, I bought a box of the packets you can mix into a bottle from another company, but I haven't tried them. The main reason, I noticed the ingredients contain sugar and salt. To be fair to the company, Spoonful One, they say their products include less than 1 gram of sugar per serving, about the equivalent of 1 apple slice, and that this ensures that baby loves the complicated combination of flavours from seafood to fish to tree nut to sesame, because those packets cover 16 foods in a serving. And while Lil Mixins is free from added sugar, the Daily Mix box covers 7 allergens, leaving out biggies like dairy, shellfish, and wheat. I asked Meenal, how come?
So dairy, because 80% of children by age 6 months are introducing some amount of formula, so they're actually already getting dairy exposure. So then we'd be making you pay extra for something you're already feeding your baby. So what's the sense in that? And so that's the reason we don't do milk. Wheat, we found, is also relatively simple, or it's in a lot of baby cereals and other foods babies are eating. It's the same thing, right? We're trying not to duplicate things that parents are already paying for and already buying. So that's the big one. Shellfish is an interesting one where it's complicated because shellfish, when you really think about it, it's actually like saying tree nut. But shellfish is actually a whole number of allergies, right? You'd actually have to eat the shrimp and the salmon and the cod and the the whitefish, all the different fishes and stuff. And there's just sort of a bit of a diminishing return there. Like they're rarer and rarer. So we went with the ones that were kind of the most probabilistic. The last thing I'll say about that is there was a really good study that Karina Venter did out of, I believe she's the lead author on this, that showed that just by virtue of diversifying the baby's diet, it protects against more and more allergies. So there's a big clinical study going on in the United States right now, a randomized controlled trial, and even in that study, they're not looking at shellfish. And so I just think there's a huge challenge for parents. Like, if you want to do 2 grams of protein in a day, you run out of days in the week, and you have to do it every week. So then, the baby only eats so many times, and a lot of people are going to daycare. So what are you supposed to do, right? You kind of have to make these not perfect. No solution is really perfect, in that sense.
And on the frequency of exposure, so the box says use 1 packet daily. The website says 2 to 3 times a week. What is the minimum frequency to achieve maximum benefit in your view?
So according to the clinical studies, and the study was called the EAT study, done out of the UK, and they found that 2 grams of every protein a week was kind of the floor of what you wanted to do. And so you want to get every packet in. So when a baby does only 1 protein, because I think that's the challenge, is that some people only want to do peanut, right? And then you actually want them to eat a little bit more of it because that's the only allergen exposure they're getting. Whereas when you do the box every day, you're still eating an allergen, right? So again, kind of going back to that diet diversity thing, they do have this sort of like cross behavior that just by pushing your body to think about soy, it becomes a little bit more tolerant of, walnut. You know what I mean? So but if you're only doing peanut, then that's the only allergen that you're eating. You need to do a little bit more of it. And that's kind of where the clinical studies have ended up. So the LEAP study looked only at peanut, the EAT study did everything.
So with the box, I've got 7 packets to use in a week. So where the website says you can just use it 2 to 3 times a week, is that saying I can use any of my 7 packets?
No. So it's talking about if you just use the peanut, like if you're only using the peanut, you're not using the box. So that's sort of if you're only using peanut, and it does get a little confusing. I agree with you.
Okay, about this confusion over frequency of exposure, Lil Mixins also sells tubs of just peanut and just tree nut and suggests using those 3 times a week. There's also a tub of egg powder, and the website suggests using that 2 to 3 times a week. But the daily mix box that I have been using has 7 allergens with a recommendation of 1 a day, which means across a week I'm feeding Beatrix 1 portion of peanut and 1 portion of egg. Got it?
But the data is a little bit confusing because when there's been different studies. When the peanut study, right, looked at only peanut and they didn't think about any other allergen, and they did 2 times a week, right? And the egg study, that was only egg, 2 times a week. But then the one study that looked at what happens if we try and eat 7, 8, 10 different kinds of foods, they could only do it once a day, or sorry, once a week, right? 1 per day. And so that's really where these protocols come from, that's the best data we have, is exactly what worked in a big clinical study.
And what was the protective effect of that study where they ate a different one every day?
If they ate 2 grams of the protein in a week, so by eating 1 packet a day, and doing it every week, then you got the protective effect, same sort of overall, across the different allergens. I believe it was like 60% reduction in food allergy, and you get differential effect. The big challenge in the EAT study is they weren't giving people products, so the adherence was really, really bad. And so they found good data. They found good results when people adhered to it. But if you ask someone to, make even the egg, because you're supposed to boil it first and then feed it to the baby, and they do that every week, and people just quit. It was really good, but it was hard to get people to keep up with it.
So the minimum frequency to achieve maximum benefit is I've got to do a sachet a day. Just keep going.
A sachet a day. Yep.
Until she until she's 1, and then after 1, I've got to try and incorporate real foods.
Real foods.
Every single day?
No, we don't know. Honestly, we don't know because like the studies can only tell you what the study studied, right? And so we just know that continuing frequency, the hope is that by not having the allergy, she'll just make this part of her diet. That she'll be eating pestos and she'll be eating, like I said, nut butters or like a banana bread with walnuts in it or things like that. Like she'll just be eating it and then it'll be fine. It's not, I think you really want to be, I can't think of a better word than militant. You want to be rigorous. That's the word I was looking for. Rigorous, really in that 6 to 10 month time frame.
Ultimately, I asked my allergist, Dr. June Zhang at Latitude Food Allergy Care, for her thoughts on whether I should stick with the daily mix of 7 allergenic foods at 1 per day across a week, or to switch to fewer allergens but feeding those same ones more often. In an email, she responded, "There isn't scientific evidence supporting an optimal frequency of exposure across allergens yet, other than for peanuts. So at this time, we consider any frequent exposure of these other foods to be beneficial." For the remainder of my chat with Meenal, we spoke about her book, The Baby and the Biome. It's a book about her firstborn son Leo's multiple food allergies, asthma, eczema, combined with research and suggestions around protecting the health of our children's microbiomes from damage that could potentially increase the risk of developing issues like food allergies. Check out healthHackers episode 62 for that. I will link to it in the summary text that goes with this video. So it's been over a month since I started using the Lil Mixins Daily Mix packets. It was going well until Beatrix started vomiting a few hours after the egg packets. She's had 5 egg servings across 5 weeks. The first 3 were fine. So at the time of recording this video, we're waiting to see what our allergist says about that. I told Meenal. She said it is still possible to develop an allergy while doing early introduction. We will wait and see what the doctor says. In the meantime, I'm ready to round up my likes and dislikes about my experience with Lil Mixins Daily Mix. We'll start with my dislikes. When I sat down to list these, it became clear that most of the things I don't like are probably more about the early allergen introduction practice than they are about the product. For example, it's been scary. Because I'm a new mum, feeding any solids is new to me, and then throwing in some highly allergenic ones whilst trying to protect myself from an allergic response too, that can be uncomfortable. So I appreciated the support from my allergist and our paediatrician. It's messy. Yep, that's what happens when you feed babies. Thankfully, I have a husband who is able to feed and clean up the packets I'm allergic to. It would be helpful to have a powder that I could occasionally just mix into a bottle, but you already heard what Meenal said about that. Frequency. I was getting confused about how often I was supposed to be feeding Beatrix the allergens for the most benefit, but like my allergist told me, there isn't scientific evidence supporting an optimal frequency of exposure across allergens yet, other than for peanuts. Another point I want to make about frequency is that following the Lil Mixins instructions to feed a packet a day means at times it can feel somewhat regimented. However, like I said, these dislikes may be more about the practice of early introduction than the product itself. But cost is a dislike that can be attributed to Lil Mixins. The Daily Mix box is $44.99, or you can subscribe for $40.49 every 28 days. That feels pricey to be paying until Beatrix is 1. The cost is similar to other brands on the market though. And finally, it'd be good if there were packets for other major allergens like dairy, shellfish and wheat. But I get it, there are only so many days in the week, and I have been incorporating dairy by mixing some packets with yogurt. Okay, now for my likes. Simplicity. It has been simple to use mix-in infant-safe powders compared to, I would imagine, trying to create meals with the natural forms of cashew, walnut, sesame, peanut, almonds, egg and soy that have a consistency safe enough for my baby to eat. That would be time-consuming at the very least. The packets are measured portions with 2 grams of protein per sitting, which corresponds with the amounts used in that study Meenal mentioned. Also, individual packets make it easier to travel with. Purity. The ingredients list has no added sugar or salt. It's all organic, and the website says each protein is made in a separate facility and packaged in a facility with tight cleaning procedures to prevent cross-contamination. Diversity. The daily mix covers 7 foods. I like that my baby is getting that nutritional exposure in an infant-safe form, and because the packets hold an allergen each, we had a better idea of what Beatrix might have reacted to when she was vomiting. In our case, possibly the egg sachets. Story. Meenal is an allergy mum. On the Lil Mixins website, she says her life changed when her firstborn son developed multiple food allergies, and then she found it hard preparing allergenic foods for her second son. It says the company's mission is to make early introduction easy so we can put an end to food allergies. So really my like here is that I admire and respect that Meenal has used her story, her knowledge from the experiences with her little boy, and turned them into something that could help others. So that's it for my likes and dislikes. I want to say something about safety before I go though. You know, I felt nervous when feeding Beatrix some of the allergens for the first time. My allergist told me what antihistamine I could keep on hand and how much to give her if needed. So please talk to your doctors about your baby, your intentions with early introduction, and get advice from them. If you see a reaction, seek medical attention. We will be working with our healthcare providers regarding what's happened with Beatrix. That's it for this episode. If you found this video interesting or useful, I would love it if you hit the like button or subscribe and leave me a comment below. It really means a lot when you support my work and give feedback in that way. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.